Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legends of Tomorrow, as well as the latest episode of Arrow. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Legends of Tomorrow, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Arrow. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Legends of Tomorrow. Okay, so let's break down a lot of the interesting things that went down in this episode. Obviously, we're picking up, sometime after Hank had died. The Legends are there to kind of pay respect, to be there for Nate. And I love the kind of awkwardness that Ray is in, because for him, it's like the woman I was exchanging love letters with is the one who killed your dad. And it's just kind of, and so he's trying to avoid Nate, but Nate was like, nah, man, it's like, you gave Nora a second chance. My dad, turns out he was torturing supernatural creatures. I guess we both didn't know the people that we cared about. And I love him being like, oh, he's like, because Ray was like, I didn't know how to handle it. He's like, yeah, you're still my bro. I'll always love you, bro. And I'm like, and then the moment he said, I'm like, yeah, that means that there's going to be a complication in the nearby future, which makes me wonder whether that complication will still stick around, but we'll see as the episodes progress. But, I love it when Sarah and them, because obviously like a mission comes up, but Sarah kisses his cheek, as they go off to the mission, and then Ray kisses Nate's cheek after Sarah did, and then like Nate and Ray kind of look at you for a second like, shouldn't have done that. Even the whole Zari and Nate situation of like, oh, we should probably, my mom's gonna be a little upset when we fake break up, but then like Zari's like, no, then let's not break up. I mean, for your mom's sake. I mean, obviously she's been through a lot this week. Let's not add to it. And it seemed like they're about to have a moment. Then Zari kind of pulls away. It actually plays a big part in this episode. The whole, the facet of the heart and everything is a big part in this episode. I love that basically everyone is kind of telling Zari what to do. Like, Charlie's saying, go ahead and basically bang Nate. But then you have Sarah being like, bang someone else. So that if you still feel the same way about Nate, that means it's true. Because Mona can smell it. It's like, oh, he smells like Nate. And arousal or something. And she's like, it'd be weird if I like Nate. And then Sarah's like, Nate totally likes you. He said it when he was infected with that truth bug. And it's like, she's like, no. And then but I love when it was all said and done, Mona was like, why don't you just talk to Nate? And you have Charlie and Sarah looking so disgusted, like, ew, gross, why would you even suggest that? Ugh. Which is so interesting. I guess, it's just interesting to me because, like, Sarah is literally just coming out of a relationship. You would think her advice would be a little bit different, but maybe it's because she's coming out of a bad breakup and everything like that. But I guess for her, that's also it, because it's like, oh, if there's really something there, bang someone else. So you'd be like, oh, these feelings are real. Then you know what you have. It's not just it's not just a lust thing, that there is love behind it. There is feeling, there's heart behind it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. They end up going back to Jane Austen's time because she apparently didn't write the books, which it turns out Mona is a big component of them. It's interesting, too, because in this episode we kind of learn how much of a, sucker for romance Mona is, which I think I'm kind of like Mona in a lot of regards, because I'm kind of naive when it comes to love. It's just kind of like I'm one of those people that has the word that I've kind of been described as, and I think Mona fits that, is that, fantasized notion of romance, of like what love should be and what it is, that type of situation. So obviously Mona's, view of love gets crushed the moment she actually meets Jane Austen, because Jane Austen is like, oh, the fact of the matter is, like, because for her it's like, oh, you should, marrying simply for love is kind of stupid, in what she says initially, because it's like, oh yeah, because like the two ladies that get together in this episode, it's like, oh, she was supposed to marry someone else, but she's like, oh, she followed her heart and got with the person that she loved. But it's like, doing that, all you're doing is putting yourself in a position where it's like, oh, you two have no money to kind of fall back on, because you're going to get disowned by your families and have nothing to, so it's like you're naive if you think that you're a fool in particular. And it's like, oh, if you haven't learned that lesson, then that makes you a fool, because you have to be taught the lesson a second time. And obviously Mona didn't appreciate that. And it led to an interesting conversation between her and Sorry, because obviously, like, I'll get to it in a second, but obviously everyone had, like, their sex dreams, which is just a weird thing, because of Sanjay, which I'll get to him in a second. But obviously Mona dreamed about Konane, and Zari was basically like, the fact is you don't really know him. And Mona was like, the fact of the matter is, love is when you're willing to take a chance, take a leap of faith even without knowing what the consequences of. That's kind of what love's all about. But Zari is like, that's stupid, because you should know the person before you give your heart to them, which is interesting because like obviously you've known Nate for a little while, but to be fair, that was Nate also in a relationship with Amaya. To be fair, they were in a complicated way at that point by the time Zari got introduced to Nate and Amaya. But I guess because she still feels like she doesn't know Nate enough. But it's not even just that. I think that's all an excuse. You kind of learn about it a little bit later on. But essentially, they had two different opinions because, Mona, once again, is kind of that fantasized notion of love, like everything's going to work out. And then Zari has the whole, like, protect your heart, only give it out when it's really 100% necessary, when you really know 100% for sure. And it's kind of a combination of they're both right and they're both wrong. And it's kind of a combination of the two, because it's something that Mona ended up being explained to by, Jane Austen. Because at first, like, her true motivation is like, no, she does believe in love, marrying only for love. But for her, it's like, that's kind of not good enough in a lot of cases. Because in her case, it's like, when her dad dies, like, her and her sister are not going to have any money. So it's like, she has to marry for money so she can make sure she takes care of herself as well as her family, her sister. And it's this situation of like, she doesn't believe she'll sell books. But Mona's like, you totally will, because you're my favorite author. And the fact is, they are timeless books. And I love what Jane had said of basically like, love is having essentially this, it's a partnership. This partnership that you're in this together. It's not meant to be just something you lose control of yourself. And essentially, in layman's terms, basically, it's something you come together on and it's control. Don't let like you being just so spiraling out of control, let that be your love, because that ends up what's happening to Zari when she gets with Sanjay, who is supposed to be Kumadeva, which is interesting because it's because he's actually he's what's kind of pulled from the Kama Sutra is kind of pulled from, because he's like the Hindu god of love. But it turns out it's not even him. It's actually some dude named Sanjay who found his ashes, and it just made it so that, that's what this is all about. It's about spreading love and lust, and obviously he ends up getting everyone on the ship, and everyone has some dreams. Obviously, Sarah's dreaming about Ava. Charlie, apparently it was her and David Bowie. I even love her being like, she's just kind of like, oh, if Zari won't jump him. This is before they knew he was Sanjay, or even before they thought he was a Hindu god. It's like, oh, if Zari won't jump him, I will. Zari, her dream was about Sanjay and Nate, and I love Zari looking to the camera. Yeah, this is totally a dream. But even I was like, whoa, this is getting spicy. Like, it's just when stuff like that happens, I'm like, whoa, especially everything with Nora and Ray, especially because Ray was like, she's like, no, we should, sleep in the same bed together. He's like, oh, okay. And she touches her finger to his hand, and he kind of freaks out. He's like, no, I'm going to sleep on a chair. That's the gentlemanly thing to do. And he manages to fall asleep. I love that. It's almost kind of adorable, because even when it's like, oh, when Charlie was calling him, yo, Rage, and then she was like, Rage. He's like, it's a long story. I'll tell you about it later. It's just kind of adorable how they act. Once again, it's one of those things. It adds an extra adorableness to it because they're married in real life too. And once again, I typically don't know that. Like, it's only I randomly was watching something and that came up. I totally didn't know they were together until I looked it up. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So it just makes that even more adorable that this married couple has to act all weird and awkward around each other. It's so adorable. But I thought it was kind of neat, and like, it's hard to say whose dream it was we saw, because it might have been a combination of the two. But then, like, later on during the musical point, which, yes, I love that musicals just keep popping up in everything. I love it, because Riverdale's had a few. This is Legend's first time, but obviously, like, The Flash and Supergirl had a crossover musical. But still, nevertheless, I love it. And I love it. Charlie being like, "Whoa, is this like is this like a Bollywood musical?" And Zari's like, "You bet it is." And it's so good. Like I said, Nora and Ray kind of doing their little tango bit in it, and talking about, "Oh, I had a dream about you. It's probably not as hot as my dream about you." It just the back and forth was so adorable and interesting. And even Ray being like, I'm sorry, Nate, but I have to give in to my desires and stuff like that. It was just kind of interesting, because it's like, oh, hiding you on the ship. Because I love when Ray found out, like, when Nora was like, it wasn't me. He's like, oh, thank God. He didn't need any other explanation. All he needed was her to say, it wasn't me. He's like, oh God, I know you didn't do it, you know? And I thought that was just, I loved it. But what's really interesting is, and I love Mona coming in and she's singing Zari's name. She's like, whoa, I didn't mean to sing that, but I guess I'm just going to have to go with this whole singing thing. And she joins into the musical as well. And for her, she ends up basically saying that Zari is strong, that she has courage, that she doesn't have to get caught up in like this frenzy of feelings, that she can, it takes courage to find, what's important. And at this point, it seems like that might be Nate. And so I love it too. And like even Charlie's being like, yeah, he's probably got he's been around 1,000 years. He probably has a wife already. And Zari's like, is that true? And he's like, at the very least, he's like 1,000. And he's like, 1,001 is great and fantastic. And she's like, what, you think? And she's like, no, we're not getting married. So I think this is a big step for both. Obviously it's probably bringing Zari and Mona closer, but also a step forward with both of them. This might be helping put Mona in a situation, because it's obviously because I think she might try and find new love going for it. Maybe, I don't know. But I think it also fit too, because obviously she has a hard time controlling her monster side, which is interesting considering the fact that Charlie kept trying to egg her into releasing it, because it's like, come on, you're a monster now, come on. I think for Charlie embracing it a lot more, because it's like, yeah, for the first time she's like not the only supernatural creature on board, so it's like, yeah, there's another one of me, another person on board like me, so cool. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see, what Mona ends up doing, now that, obviously Konana is gone and everything, but it's like, is she just going to put her heart on a shelf, or will she try and find new love? Obviously she still needs time to recover, but I think for her, she's not going to lose complete control. I think she's going to recognize what she had and keep that. And it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing about that. Also about Zari, because I forget, all the while this was happening, obviously Constantine's going around and it's like, oh, Hank is still there, but Nate still holds a grudge against his dad for all the terrible stuff that he did. He's got his mom's telling him to make a speech. Obviously he was going to go like, oh, say all the terrible things about his dad, but then he's just kind of, my dad worked a lot, at least now he gets to rest now that he's gone. But his mom told a story of his dad having worked a lot and then wouldn't take a 1 week off to take Nate to Disneyland, but it didn't work out because Nate got sick, and it came with Mickey Mouse dressed up in the Mickey Mouse suit and kind of made Nate's day. And that moment, it was kind of Nate kind of believed in magic, essentially being like, oh yeah, the magic of everything. And I guess subsequently that kind of, well, for one, it turns Nate around, making him go like, oh, I guess my dad's not as bad as, because it's that thing of a lot of times people in general, myself included, we have a tendency to kind of remember the negative and not always the good and positive. And Nate had such a complicated relationship with his dad for so long that I'm sure for him, he was like, I probably almost forgot about a lot of the good memories like that with his dad. And because even his mom was like, he wasn't perfect, but the fact of the matter is he tried his best. He was, that's what he can be at least known for, a man who always did his best, For Nate, he ends up discovering what his dad was up to, and it's interesting. Was not what I was expecting. I was like, oh, you're obviously using this for military reasons. It's like, no, his reasoning for it, because he was trying to make essentially a monster zoo / it's a theme park essentially, but with supernatural creatures, because for him he thought hey, this be an opportunity to bring magic to the world, because it was based on something Nate had drawn years ago when he was 9 or something, and it's he wanted to kind of bring that to life. That's what he wanted when he said he was doing this for Nate, alone. I think because for one, it's hey, this would be something that we technically collaborated on, and so it would be hey, I did this for you, son. This can help bridge their relationship, but also it'll be for the world, because for him it's meant to be something that everyone can enjoy, put their differences aside and enjoy, and it's oh, you weren't torturing the animals, you were just getting them ready for a zoo, which you can also make the argument, it's well, not zoo, but theme park, but it's you were training them to do that. I'm sure someone could make the argument, be well, that's still a little fucked up anyway, but I digress, that's neither here nor there. But I guess the people he brought in were just kind of assholes about the whole situation, so they probably weren't as careful as they should have been. They were kind of, so, but still. it puts things in a different light for Nate. He kind of realizes like, wow, like the way what you had planned and your way of going about it is like, that's honestly a Legends way of handling things, you know? So he's like, this side of you, I wish I could have known more. Obviously, Constantine using Nick as the source for Hank, who ends up possessing his body. He's like, who else would it be? And he's like, oh, it's Hayward's. We hold a grudge. But he ends up revealing to Constantine that it was Neuron behind all of this, that he made a deal with him. Which is interesting, because that means he knew from the beginning that Neuron was a demon, which is interesting. Well, I guess there's no point in kind of like sugarcoating it. It's like, I'll help you get what you want, as long as I get. I wonder what was he planning on getting on. Like, once again, I'm assuming it's just like he wants an army of supernaturals to kind of control as his own. Maybe that's what he was getting out of this, or there's something else. I'm curious what he was getting out of this bargain. But it didn't click in my head to think like, oh, I just assumed he didn't know that's what Neuron's whole real deal was. But it's like, I was like, did he find that out after death? It's like, no, he knew ahead of time. Like, he went into this deal knowing, oh, this is Neuron. I mean, that's what demons do. They make deals with people, So that kind of took me by surprise. But now Constantine knows that Neuron's around. Not only is he around, he sees it's like, oh, you're also in the body of the man I love. So that adds major complications to it. And now obviously, like, Neuron's kind of messing with him because in the reflection, he makes himself look like Constantine. It's like, oh, the fact of the matter is you couldn't save Desmond. You couldn't save Astra. You can't even help Nate. The fact of the matter is, you want to damn them all. You want them all to go to hell so you don't have to be alone. And it's like, shut up. And now, I'm curious to see, I'm assuming he's going to relay this information to Nate. Because if not, it's going to lead to a complication where Ray is like, with Nora, and it's like, whoa, you're with the woman who killed my dad because Constantine hasn't gotten to Nate. Maybe he's reluctant about saying it because he's afraid that if he tells Nate the truth, then they're all going to go after Neuron. Maybe he wants to be the one to handle Neuron on his own, so he doesn't want anyone else involved because he wants to kind of keep them as far away from this as possible. I'm curious to see what he ends up doing about that, especially considering the fact is, like, obviously Ray and Nora are going to want to track down Neuron. I'm curious to see how this all ends up playing out. Like I said, just the way things kind of set up made me think like, oh yeah, there's going to be tension because of the whole Nate, Ray, and Nora thing, but maybe that won't necessarily be a thing. Maybe the hatchets will get buried and it's like, nope, she didn't kill your dad, it was Neuron. Or, like I said, John, for whatever reason, doesn't tell. We'll ultimately have to wait to see what goes down in the next episode to find out where this all takes us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Arrow. A great episode. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. It is purely a Canary episode. Okay, so there's a lot to talk about. Obviously, we have, Laurel going back to her Black Sirens age, because basically her entire life turned upside down. She got framed for murder. She lost her job. Dinah didn't have her back. So, because Dinah's just kind of like, oh, this is to be expected. Laurel is Laurel. She was always Black Siren. But obviously, Felicity doesn't want to give up on her because Felicity's like, see how much she's grown in between season 6 and season 7? How much she's grown, how much she's changed. She helped with Oliver and everything. She's the one that came to us about, Emiko and stuff like that, because it turns out Emiko's the one that framed her for murder. So of course, because that was the thing, it's like, because even Felicity was like, if it was Laurel, would she even bother like being so sloppy as to leave evidence behind to prove that she did it? It's like, no. So like all this evidence, it was like a plan in Emiko, because Emiko wanted to cause a rift. I mean, more so than anything, it's like, no, it's payback for you exposing her to Oliver being like, oh yeah, your sister's bad and evil. So it turned out to be the wrong thing, but I was under the impression that Laurel was working an angle. I thought the entire episode, like, oh yeah, she was playing the bad guy when in actuality she was a good guy. I thought this whole thing was supposed to be leading to her getting closer to like the Ninth Circle, because I figured that's who because Shadow was like, oh yeah, I'm working for someone. I thought that's what that was all about, but it was like, no, turns out at least that's not where things ended up. She did say she had a buyer. Who's to say it wasn't a Ninth Circle who was behind it? It's just we never got to that point in the episode. Potentially, I don't know. But holy shit, because I guess I didn't see Katie Lotz's name. I was so surprised when it's like, we hear Canary cry. I'm like, where the hell did that come from? It's freaking Sarah. I'm like, what? I didn't know you were going to be in this episode. This is so awesome. Which is so interesting considering the fact is that, it's so interesting because she's in her white Canary suit, which obviously is very befitting of the episode. But I'm like, yeah, even though if you know, in Legend, she doesn't wear that outfit that often. Like, she doesn't wear her Canary suit. I honestly can't remember the last time she did, because she's usually wearing like whatever clothes they travel in, or even casual clothes. She rarely wears the Canary outfit, you know. So, but that was pretty dope having her back. I even love the moment between her and Felicity, because like Sarah's like, oh yeah, I remember back, you know, then the girl who, you know, was secretly had feelings for Oliver. She's like, yeah, apparently everyone knew but me. And it's like, back then when you always compliment and stuff like that, where did you flirting with? She's like, why did you like it? She's like, of course, because it was coming from you. And they hugged and everything. I'm like, oh my god, because even Sarah doing the thing that her and Oliver do. I know, even love Felicity being like, it almost feels like deja vu. It feels like a lifetime ago. Holy shit, does it feel like forever. I mean, to be fair, she was there during the Heroes crossover, Heroes versus Aliens, like the Arrow episode. She was there, if I remember correctly. But even then, it's like her just purely popping up on Arrow. It's been a long time since then. That almost seems like a lifetime ago, which I guess it's in a sense, considering all the time traveling she's done. It's nice. I mean, obviously she popped up at the season 6 finale, but still, it's crazy to me to see her there again. And obviously her working with Dinah and Felicity. Felicity almost kind of gives up on Laurel for a second, because it's like, oh, Laurel tried to kill us. But it's like, because even Dinah's like, yeah, see, like I told you, she was always a bad person. But it took Felicity being like, well, look at you, Dinah. You weren't on really the best terms when we were meeting you. You were crossing that line yourself. You were even going to cross that line last season when you were trying to kill Laurel for killing Vince. But it's like, no. She's like, but I didn't, because she's saying that Laurel has a choice, but Laurel keeps messing up every choice. But, for Felicity, it's like, because we don't have her back. You didn't go down that path because you had us backing you up to kind of steer you away from that path. Laurel has no one, because for her, she wants, because like Dinah was like, she obviously doesn't want it. It's like, for Felicity, it's like, because she didn't know she wanted it or needed it. Because she was just kind of like, oh, I don't need their approval or whatever, or I don't need their support. But in actuality, she does. She just didn't realize it, and it took this moment, when Felicity was like, if you're going to kill someone, because obviously that device you're selling is going to get a lot of people killed, you're going to have to start with me. And Sarah and Dinah had her back, in that regard. And Laurel probably had hesitation for multiple reasons. One, Felicity's pregnant too. For one, Felicity's her kind of her bestie, and she's pregnant, so that's two right there. There's your Earth 1 sister, and then there's the whole situation, which is so interesting when you actually think about it, because let's not forget, like, Kara during the Elseworlds crossover had a very similar situation, with Alex and everything, so it's just kind of interesting to kind of see comparisons in that regard. But obviously Dinah hurt, because even Dinah was like, yeah, I thought me and Laura were actually in a good place, and so she backed up. She backed down, and they were able to save the day. And I love that Dinah was like, okay, so I'll make it so that, Laurel's name is cleared, because it's like, yeah, you didn't actually murder that guy, and secretly you were undercover trying to capture Shadow Thief. And it's like, oh, so it kind of puts Laurel's name back in good graces. But for Laurel, she's not sticking around. She's actually going back to Earth 2, because for her, it's like, she can't be running forever, because it's the whole thing of like, you can't run from the bad that you've done. And that's kind of what Sarah was kind of talking to her about, because for Sarah, it's like, she understands, because Sarah's done a lot of bad in her life, obviously. Like, she ended up running down all the stuff that she's done, which is so interesting when you hear it. Even, Laura was being sarcastic of like, oh wow, look at you being all bad. It's like, when we actually break down everything that went down in Sarah's life, like, it is kind of crazy when you actually say it all out loud like that. But for her, it's like, I did a lot of bad stuff, and I wasted so much time running from it, because I was scared to, deal with the pain that I had created. And so when she stopped running, and kind of faced up for what she did, yes, it was hard, but in the end, it was worth it, because it allowed her to stop running and kind of stand, and that has led her to be who she is right now. And she's telling Laurel to stop running, and I think obviously Laurel takes that advice and she stops running. She wants to go back to Earth 2 to rectify that. And it's so like, I was like, because obviously it's like, okay, obviously she's not there in the future. It's like, oh yeah, because she's back on her own Earth trying to change everything, which is so interesting. She also made a reference to like, oh yeah, like, because it's like, Felicity's like, oh, so that's why you knew I was pregnant, because your sister was pregnant, which is interesting. So that means on Earth 2, Sarah had, you know, a kid or kids at some point in time, which is interesting. Well, because I was about to say, because the whole, well, we know his dad, like, we know Oliver's dad, Robert, becomes a Green Arrow on Earth too. At least that's what they reference, like, on the Flash when he went to, you know, when Barry and Iris went to Earth. No, was that just Barry? When Barry went to Earth 2, I think. But nevertheless, so I would assume that's still in continuity, but I'm curious about, like, what's that? Cause I think it was that, you know, it's kind of like that Batman thing of, like, Flashpoint of, like, oh yeah, his dad died, Bruce died, so Thomas is the one who became Batman. I wonder, is it kind of a similar situation, or is it just that, like, no, like, on Earth 2, Oliver's still alive? No, because he's dead. I forgot, yeah, because that was a thing for, her. It's like, yeah, I forgot Oliver's dead on Earth 2, because I remember that was a thing. That was kind of a point for Sarah. I mean, for Laurel. Nevertheless, I was wondering if, like, you know, Earth 2 Laurel and Oliver had gotten together. Nevertheless, that's beside the point. I went on a huge tangent for nothing. Nevertheless, it was just me just kind of overthinking some things. But nevertheless, but that was pretty neat. It's kind of sad because obviously, like, you know, Laurel put so much time in being the DA, and now she's kind of having to leave that behind and stuff like that. So it's kind of sad. All three sirens working together like that, which was pretty dope. And I'm wondering if that's what they're kind of going for. Are we getting like was that supposed to be like a Star City Sirens type of situations? Like, I don't know. Because, I mean, I know the Gotham Sirens are a thing, but I'm wondering, is that what that's supposed to be a little thing? I mean, because Black Canary's connected to the Gotham Sirens. At least with the movie that's coming out, she is. I don't know if she typically is. No way, I'm confusing it. I'm thinking that's the Birds of Prey. That's the reference they were making. I remember Felicity was making some reference. That's what that is. She was making a reference to, like, the Birds of Prey or something like that. When I'm confused, because I'm thinking of the Gotham Sirens was Harley Quinn, Catwoman, and Poison Ivy. Completely different thing. Nevertheless, Birds of Prey is what I was thinking of, which they are making a movie about that. So, but it's still just kind of interesting to think about. I am just all over the place during this recording. I do apologize. What was also interesting, too, is the device that Sarah was using. It was Laurel's, but it was kind of modified, which is kind of neat. Which I'm like, well, there's the device at the end. So I'm confused on whether that's the same device or is it a different device. Because I know it's like this is Laurel's, but maybe she was saying the one that Sarah had was kind of like Laurel's, but it was modified. And the one that Laurel ended up getting was one, but that she was going to give to Dinah. Maybe it was kind of like an older model that had to be modified or whatever. Either way, I just think it's pretty dope, like, you know, reusing some of Laurel's old stuff, even giving Laurel from Earth 2, Laurel from Earth 1's suit. So she could go to Earth 2 and kind of be reborn as the Black Canary instead of Black Siren. Which that all ties together with the future, because obviously the Canaries are being hunted down. Mia kind of want to go off on her and do her own thing, but, you know, you have Dinah being like, the Canaries isn't just a, you know, a resistance group. It's a group of women knowing that, hey, there are other women out there having your back. It's a support group that kind of, like, there's a strength in numbers. And for her, it's like, this whole experience with Laurel made her realize, kind of like turning her back on someone who needs their help most. And she kind of let that slip her mind. And she created the Canary so that she would never forget that lesson. This whole situation when Laurel told her about, like, not giving up on someone, being there to support someone in their time of need, you know? Because things could have turned out disastrously if it weren't for them being there for Laurel, you know? So, which in turn, when Mia's in trouble, Laurel shows up. It's like, yo! I wonder, does she kick it on Earth 1 now? Did she find her way back to Earth 1? Or did, you know, because times are desperate, you know, she needed another Canary on her side, so she brought in Laurel. But it might just be a situation of Laurel came back when things got bad, like when she needed to, like, someone else to support her during the Canary situation, she called Laurel, which is interesting because it shows obviously that they are on good terms, that I think they did become good friends. Maybe they kept in communications. Either way, it's just kind of a nice little thing too. It's like, yay! Because, you know, otherwise you kind of think like, oh, something bad, like, oh, she's not around anymore. So, but it's like, no, she's there and she's kicking it in the future, so. But it also did set up kind of creating even deeper bonds between Laurel and Sarah, basically being like, yeah, you know, you felt like you were alone at one point in time, but you're not, you know, God, I'll be there for you too, you know? So it's kind of neat. It's kind of like, oh, like, it's like, because even, I thought it was kind of sweet too, where Sarah was kind of like, yeah, no one is better than, you know, the original Laurel, because even Sarah being like, not even me, you know? So it was just kind of an interesting thing. And once again, going back to like all the stuff that Sarah's done. So, but I just thought that was a nice little element to the episode and stuff like that. I'm wondering who's going to step up and be DA now that Laurel's not there. Maybe that's going to be a problem. Maybe we'll see that kind of be a point that they make. But what ends up happening, obviously Oliver and Diggle go look into the person responsible for killing Emiko, and it turns out it's one of the longbow hunters, which I did not expect that to play out like that. I wasn't expecting that, because at first it's like, oh, it's you. I'm like, oh, do we know who this guy is? And then he was like, longbow hunter. I was like, oh, okay. At the very least, he is. Does that mean the other two are involved as well? Or are we going to see them circle back in the story, or is that just kind of as far as they potentially go, like their part to play in earlier parts of season 7? I don't know. But it's interesting because it does seem like Dante is responsible for putting the hit out on her mom, which I'm not too surprised about, because I figured that was the whole point, to put her in the position that she was in. Now you have Oliver thinking that it's like, if I tell her the truth, then her relationship with the Nine Circle will break, and, you know, everything can be stopped. Because obviously it's like, okay, because everything led to Emiko going down the path that she did, her mom getting murdered. It led her down this dark path. I mean, because Oliver can understand, like, the situation that him and his dad were put him on his path. So, you know, and it was not the most, you know, light path. There's a lot of darkness on that path. So I think he can understand and empathize, in fact. So he wants to see the best side of things, but you can tell from the look that Diggle kind of gave him, like, even he's kind of not certain about it. And even I'm not. When it's all said and done, either she won't care, either she'll just straight up kill Dante and still keep going, or maybe this will shatter everything, you know, especially considering the fact is, because I think they're still under the impression that she works for Dante. Dante actually works for her, so I don't know. Because I'm wondering, is it going to end up being some twisted situation where she put the hit out on her own mom just because for her, I mean, because I'm sure for Dante, like, if it turns out he is the one behind this, it's like, well, his justification is like, the fact of the matter is your mom was a weakness. She could be used against you, so we had to remove her from the board to put you on the path that you're at. But another part of me was wondering if it's going to be a situation of, like, she did it herself because of that very reason. I don't know. I'm leaning more towards it is probably still Dante, but I'm not completely removing the thought that maybe she is responsible for her own mom's murder. I have no idea. I just don't think things are going to play out the way Oliver thinks they will. Maybe they will, but I'm just kind of thinking it's going to be a slim chance. But we'll ultimately have to wait and see what the next episode has in store for us, all of this. Obviously, everything in the future, too, because there's that helmet that's supposed to be helping with take down the vigilantes. Well, that's like a major weapon by Galaxy 1, so now that's potentially taken off the board, and Felicity can use that to potentially help with this whole situation. It's going to be interesting to see how everything ends up playing out, because obviously it seems like there's stuff set up in the past, because, like, once again, it's like, oh, like, stuff, you're supposed to be the device that helps Dinah kind of get her scream back. Obviously, like, you know, it's based, you know, it's Laurel's scream from Earth 1 Laurel, because obviously hers came from a device, so it's like that, but it's like she doesn't have it in the future, so either it got damaged or broken, or it's supposed to represent the fact is that the future that we're seeing isn't set in stone, that things are constantly in the process of changing. Like, whatever happens in the future might affect the present day to make it so that that future never happens, or maybe we're going full forward to that future and we just got to continue seeing how we build up to it. Either way, I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.